Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're starting a new series called Money for Med Students, where we talk to med students, residents, physicians, and other professional trainees so we can increase our financial well-being, our financial literacy, and learn how to do real life. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Jordan Frey, a plastic surgeon who specializes in microsurgery. He is also known as the Prudent Plastic Surgeon. He runs his own blog and talks all about his journey on figuring out all things finances. So let's get started and see what he has to say. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. And I guess, I know a little bit about you since I've kind of read up on your blog, and I just wanted to mention a little bit about myself. I'm currently a second-year student at Mayo Clinic in Arizona, and kind of my motivation in speaking with you and just in general is, as I've gone through med school thus far, I feel like, we're taught how to save lives, but we're not taught how to actually manage our finances or money, which I think is just such an ironic thing. And my initial goal was, thinking, how can I create a learning environment at my school where we can learn about personal finance? And then I was like, it's a bigger, broader problem than that. So how can I bring that to more students than just, people at my school? So that was my kind of motivation in speaking to you and starting a conversation and dialogue about it. I would love to know a little bit more about like your background and how and when you started thinking about, maybe I should learn about personal finance. This is important.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is great. And I think that personal finance should be incorporated into medical student and even like resident education. And that's something that's definitely missing and contributes a lot to kind of the burnout that is, becoming endemic or pandemic in medicine. And kind of my story started a lot later than yours. I did medical school, and then I did plastic surgery training, which is 6 years. I did the integrated pathway, and then I did an extra year of microsurgery fellowship. So at the end of that fellowship, I kind of realized that I was feeling burned out. And I also realized that I was really stressed about my finances. I never quite put my finger on the pulse of it, but I realized I was really stressed out, and that was a big part of my burnout, because I was reaching the end of my training and people were like, oh, you're going to be a plastic surgeon. You're finally like graduating. You're going to be making all this money. You're going to be set. It's going to be awesome. And I was like, well, I don't feel like it's awesome, because I have $500,000 in debt. I have a bunch of credit. That's just student loans. I have credit card debt. I don't know how to manage my money. I don't have any retirement savings. I don't know how to go about that. I don't even know, like, we're trying to figure out, do we buy a house? Do we rent a house? How much house can we buy? I have no idea how to do that. It was all really stressing me out. And so my wife and I kind of, set about to change that. And the first step was kind of learning how to do that. So we started reading books, blogs, podcasts, things like that. And then the other half of it was kind of like looking at my mistakes, which I'd never done really for fear of how bad they were. Things like I deferred all of my, I used loans to pay for college and medical school completely. And I deferred them the whole 7 years that I was in training, which is really, really silly. And I'm kicking myself even more about it now that they've changed the public service loan forgiveness to make it more broad and applicable to more people. But I missed out on that opportunity completely, because I just deferred, because I just ignored them, because I was scared to look at them. I basically just like once a year closed my eyes and did that. So, but what I realized, like, I was still a trainee when I started learning about this. And I found myself, just by having a plan in place, like just when I basically realized, oh, you know what, my loans are massive, but if I make the right decisions, I can pay them all off in 5 years. Like, that's awesome. Just having that plan in place relieves so much stress. And my burnout got better, my like overall well-being got better. And it sort of all started to click that, what I call financial well-being is like a really important but overlooked aspect of well-being, especially in medicine. Yeah. Because you'll see, as you probably already see to a certain degree, but you'll see as you go further and further on, the topic of money is really kind of taboo among physicians, because like we didn't get into it for the money, and that's right. That's not why I do what I do. I'm not, intrinsically motivated by that. But if you ignore it completely, that also impedes your ability to be a good doctor, even more so. So I think it is important for doctors to know about that, and for that education to start early.
So you would say you kind of became more proactive and started learning towards the latter half of your residency?
Yeah, it was like the last 4 months of my training, pretty
Okay.
much. And I'm lucky that I realized it at that point and not after I became an attending, because
Mm-hmm.
it's much easier for my wife and I to, like, kind of pump the brakes and make the changes before we had already started spending more money. Because that's the problem that doctors get into, is you make a high salary, but people think that high salary means you're wealthy, when it's not.
Yeah.
If you make $1 million and you spend $1 million, you're broke.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make $1 million and you spend $2 million, then you're in debt. Your net worth is negative $1 million.
Yeah.
And a lot of doctors don't realize that, and things like lifestyle creep, etc. Because when you have a high income, people are willing to loan you a lot of money, and then you start buying stuff with credit or with debt or with mortgages, and before you know it, you realize, shoot, I gotta, even though I'm maybe 60 and I'm feeling like I'm ready to stop working, I got to keep working because I still have all these debts to pay off.
Mm-hmm. And so, you came to this realization right as you were finishing residency, but was there ever a time before, like during medical school or even earlier on in your residency, where you were like, maybe I should learn about this? Or was it kind of just out of fear you ignored it?
Out of fear, I ignored it. There's definitely times looking back where, like, I would hear people talking about it, or even just, like, especially in medical school, hearing people talk about all the loans and trying to minimize loans, which is kind of like the main strategy
Mm-hmm.
in medical school, is really kind of minimizing the amount of loans you take or use. And I was just like, well, that's future Jordan's problem. And then
Yeah.
it just kept stacking up and stacking up until it kind of came to a head.
So then going back to, obviously you believe that we should teach kind of personal finance during residency.
Yeah.
Where do you see that play a role in medical school? Do you think that that's something important, maybe to be part of the curriculum in medicine?
Yeah, 100%. And I even know a couple of my friends in medical school at least had something where it was someone, and a physician, not just like a loan officer
Yeah.
who's going to kind of like spit jargon, but a physician who's kind of a little more relatable, talk about loans and paying them back and how to manage them, and even the public service loan forgiveness program, kind of the ins and outs of that. And so he ended up being in a much better situation than I was, because
Mm-hmm.
he was aware of these things. But I do think in medical school there should be, it really doesn't matter how you do it, if it's just a seminar or if it's once a quarter or something like that, just some talk about those things. Because obviously in medical school, your primary focus is and should be on learning to become a doctor. That's got to be
Absolutely.
the primary focus.
Yeah.
But there's simple things that you can do, and just by being aware of them and making those simple changes, or creating these habits that really don't make much of a dent at first, but at least it gets you in that habit for later on when it will make a dent. That's
Yeah.
huge. And I really wish that I had that.
Yeah. And I think I reflect back and I was like thinking, oh, someday I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to be making lots of money. I don't need to know how to manage the money, because there's going to be so much of it. And that was the thought.
Yeah.
And now it's transitioned to, it doesn't matter how much there is, if you don't know how to manage it, it's not going to work out. But I think to me this is not a sexy topic. Like, why would I learn about it?
Yeah.
Somebody else
Yeah.
can do this. I'm not that type of person. So I guess my question is, how do we make it, quote unquote, a sexy topic, or a topic where people actually want to learn and not just say, oh, well, I'm going to be the doctor. That's not my job to be the finance person.
Yeah. I think everything you're saying is so similar to what I felt. And I think a lot of people in our situations, to me, when it became like sexy was when I realized kind of the concept of financial freedom, or like the buzzword is FIRE,
Mm-hmm.
which is an acronym for financial independence, retire early, which is not necessarily what I subscribe to, but the idea of financial independence or financial freedom basically meaning you don't have to work. You have enough money saved up, or you're making enough passive income from other sources that if you retire, you'd be able to cover your expenses and you don't need to work.
Yeah.
Now, the retire early part is when people decide, hey, I'm actually not going to work. That's not kind of my goal. I really, really like what I do. But what I always say is I like anything. I like anything that I'm doing a lot better when I'm doing it because I want to, not because I have to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part with physicians as well, because we all hear stories, regardless of what kind of physician you are. Either you are working for a hospital or a private practice, and they start asking more and more of you, and there's less and less of your time, or
Yeah.
you start having to do things that are not patient centered and patient focused, and you don't want to do that as a doctor. Or even if you're running a practice, something like COVID happens and you're responsible for your staff, and you have to cut back, but then that results in you also losing income. Those things are that's what leads to doctors being unhappy. But you don't have to worry about those things if you're financially free or financially independent, because if you reach that point and someone says, hey, you have to start taking more call, you just say, well, no, I don't want to do that. And if they say, okay, well, we're going to pay you less, or, go find another job or something like that, you can just say, okay, I don't have to compromise my happiness for that. So to me, that's when it became really sexy. Not so much like, oh, what interest rate am I getting on this or that, which can be kind of dry. But the idea, if you create a plan that gets you to that financial freedom in a certain amount of time, that's really exciting to me. Yeah. And that's what I try to convey to others.
Absolutely. That is sexy. That right there, when you're not being controlled by others. Right. So just to backtrack, so in your medical school, you didn't experience any form of financial curriculum really, or anything like that. In residency, did you experience anything like that?
We had what is similar to, I think, most places, is we had people come in to talk to us about like disability insurance or life insurance, and it went way over my head. But the reason why is because they were just salesmen. There were people getting paid on commission that sort of saw like, hey, this is a room full of 20 customers that are about to become attendings and have no idea what we're talking about, and will buy these products that may not be the best for them. So it wasn't really, there was not education there. It was a sales pitch. And like, I'm glad that I didn't bite, basically just because same thing, just was sticking my head in the sand, because there were a lot of people that did bite and kind of, made financial mistakes based on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, what would you say were some of the biggest mistakes that you made during medical school regarding your financial well-being? Yeah,
I think the biggest things in medical school that it comes down a lot of times, if you're someone like myself who's taking out a lot of debt, it's kind of minimizing that debt. And I didn't. I basically just took like the maximum amount I could and looked at it kind of like a salary. Not really, but in essence, that's what I was doing. And I, like I said, heard people talking and saying, oh, well, this dollar you spend by the time you're paying it off is actually going to be, $20 or whatever it is. And I just kind of ignored it because I didn't want to think about it. And so those are my biggest mistakes, is I wish that I had been more cognizant of that. I still would have had to take out loans.
Absolutely, yeah.
I wish that I hadn't done as much, or at least set myself up in a better position to start making small contributions in residency that could have chipped away at that, and also set me up for the public service loan forgiveness. But probably the biggest mistake that I made is kind of what we're talking about right now, in that I didn't start to learn about it. Because you're going to get to residency and things are going to get even crazier. Your time is going to be less and less, and it's going to be really hard to focus on a lot of that stuff, or even, again, create those habits, or gain that financial education. So I think even just as simple as if I was reading a book a year in medical school, and these books are small, just something finance related for physicians, or people in general, or just started reading a blog, maybe reading a blog post a week or something like that, or listening to a podcast, something simple that's not obviously going to be overwhelming to your studies or anything like that. But that education would have been huge. So that's definitely the biggest mistake at that point that I made.
I like this aspect of just starting from somewhere, but what the roadblock that I've run across is that there's just so much information out there. There's so many blogs nowadays, so many podcasts, so many books. And as a student, a lot of these words just go over your head, right? I think of the white coat investor as somebody who is doing a wonderful job, but it's really physician catered. And when they talk about stocks and bonds and all of those things, as a student, it just completely kills your brain. You have no idea what's happening. It's like somebody speaking to Japanese to you, and you're a native English speaker. So how do you, I guess, suggest combating that information overload, but also just the fact that we don't even know the basics? We're not business majors, we're not finance majors. Some of us don't know what a stock is. Some of us don't even know what a balance sheet is.
And I can tell you, until I was that last 4 months of my training, I literally didn't I mean, I knew what a stock was and that I heard people talking about it, but if you asked me for a definition, I couldn't give you a straight definition. So there's no shame in that. And that's definitely the point that I was starting at. And I think what helped is there's a few books that are less like, oh, this is how many bonds you should have, and this is your stock, this is your asset allocation, etc. Which is more philosophical about like, behavioral finance, which is kind of the biggest component. Because again, you can come up with a billion different financial plans that are going to work, but it requires you saving, planning, etc. So some of the best books, The Richest Man in Babylon is really good. And then The Millionaire Next Door. Those were two books that kind of opened my eyes to like, okay, there is this pathway to do this where I didn't even think there was a pathway. Even me as a physician, high income earner, I didn't really see a pathway towards building wealth because of how much in debt I was and how much I thought I needed to spend for things, which is silly to say now because we're totally in control of what we spend. Yeah. But there is that kind of feeling that you have to live up to some image. So those are two really good books. And then the third one, which gets into the very, very basics of stocks and bonds and starting to actually invest, is Coffee House Investor. It's maybe like 150 pages. You can easily read it in a weekend, written in very plain English, like really easy to understand. So those are probably like the three starter books that I would recommend and that I actually started with. Those were like my first three.
Okay. So yeah, I was going to ask you, if you could give medical students kind of like three main points of something actionable, because most of the time we talk about just theory, oh, you should do this and that, but what is it that, three things that medical students can turn around and tomorrow accomplish them? So you would say one thing, obviously, tackle any one of these three books, right? Yeah. That's an easy starting point.
That's an easy starting point.
What are, let's say, two other things that you would tell somebody, go and do this tomorrow? It's feasible for you to start this as you begin your journey.
One really easy one, which I liked a lot, was I just, even in training, and just for context, by the end of my training, I was living in New York City. We were just living on a resident salary because my wife was finishing her PhD, which was unpaid. And we had 2 kids. So we were really cash strapped. But what I still tried to do was just increase my savings rate by 1% a month. Okay. So my savings rate started at 0, meaning that I was spending 100% of everything I was making. Gotcha. And so we just challenged ourselves to save 1% a month, and then the following month to save 2%, etc. So I'd encourage you to do that. And that's, again, just building this lifelong habit, because once you get to the point of, yes, residency, but even more so being an attending, you want to try to save at least 20% of your income. I save closer now to like 45 to 50%. But you want to save 20% to invest and do things like that. And this is another takeaway. If you're a doctor and you find a job you like that you're going to work at for throughout your career, and you save 20% of what you're going to make and invest it, you will be fine. Like, you will pay off your debt, you'll retire comfortably, you'll live an amazing life. Like, you will be fine. It's that simple. So I kind of got away from my point there, but 1% a month, I think that's a good actionable goal. And then a third one, I want to say something that's not education, but I do think that's so important, because I keep thinking I do have a podcast, Finance Flash Go, which is just like this, like talking about like, what is a stock, what is a bond, etc. Because I didn't find anything out there when I was like searching for like the real basics. So that's another recommendation. And I think, this is a good one. So there is, if you want like practice investing, I don't have any relationship with this company or anything like that, but there's an app called Acorns. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I've actually heard of it probably about 3 to 5 years ago, actually.
Yeah. So what they do is you basically connect it to your bank account, and if you go and spend, whatever, $4.50 buying something, it's going to round up to the next whole number. So it's going to take 50 cents. Yeah. And it's going to invest it in like a broadly diversified index fund. So passive investing, which, without getting into the weeds of it, is kind of the strategy you want to use for low risk and high return. And so just doing that, I started doing that also at the end of my training when I didn't really feel like I had a lot of extra money, but it's easy because it's just your change. And it'll add up. And also that just gives you a chance to see what you're doing, look at the, sort of look at the stock market, see the stock markets in the short term go up and down, which you're just going to ignore completely And then you can watch your account kind of grow over time. And honestly, by the time you're in residency, you're going to have a pretty significant amount in there. So that's a good way, because it can be scary. And what happens a lot with physicians, again, is they get to the point of finally graduating, and then all of a sudden they're like, I have a ton of money that's just sitting in my bank account, and I know I have to invest it, but I'm so scared because what if I put it in, and even if I put it in an index fund and then the price drops and all of a sudden I lose all this money, not quite understanding, well, the price may drop, but it's going to come back up, and you're investing for the long term. And essentially the stock market over the long term has always gone up. So it's a safe bet. So this kind of gives you practice with change, of kind of tolerating that cycle of the stock market that you're basically going to want to ignore your entire life, and just, keep letting that money grow regardless of what it does in the short term.
Yeah, no, those are honestly great recommendations, especially with the investing, which, I mean, I fear it, right? I fear the unknown. So that feels like a block there. I just can't do it. I know I'm wasting time by not doing it and wasting so much potential income in the future, but I just can't bring myself to do it.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah. And I really appreciate all of those tips. And I just had one final question for you to go back to this concept of, starting early. If we intervene in residency, it's great, but if we can intervene even earlier, it's much better. So should we push as students, for our medical schools to start integrating some form of, longitudinal personal finance curriculum? That's at the forefront of my mind, because I'm here now. I can push. And should I be putting effort into that?
I would 100%. Yeah, I think so. And that's something that I'm trying to push for, as well, at both of those levels. But I definitely think so. I think you are, and can expect to, from some people, get some pushback. Yeah. Because there's going to be people, again, that think that, talking about money as physicians is taboo, or not quite get it. But just be prepared for that, and don't be deterred. But no, I think that's definitely something important. And I honestly think I see physician burnout in front of my eyes. I've experienced it. And a big part is this lack of financial freedom, because people feel totally caged in to, basically careers that they are not enjoying, and that can become very burdensome. And on top of that, they may be in debt, etc. So I think that would go a huge way towards helping this. So I do think it's important.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you have any questions, you can drop them below. In the description, you will also find the key takeaway notes from this discussion, as well as the 3 action items that Dr. Jordan Frey has suggested, and his Prudent Plastic Surgeon blog. Again, if you have any questions, drop them below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.